Hey, I'm Rian from a Dram half. I wasn't even looking at the camera.
I was like dead on.
I was looking straight at the monitor. Oh my goodness, what a pork cock. A pork cock? A cork pop. Oh! I love that. Hey, I'm Rian from a Dram half full. And whether your glass is half full or half empty, I'm here to help you guys refill it. Well, actually, we're here to help you guys refill it. Today I'm sitting with Josh McMullen. He's a lifelong friend of mine and the owner, founder, and head distiller over at McMullen Distilleries. Welcome to the show again, Josh.
I'm here to help you empty your glass.
You cheeky bugger, as per usual, right? Today we're talking about one of our all-time favorite distilleries, Australian distilleries, I should say. That is Kinglake, and they're a local distillery, relatively local, depending on where you're based, but they're about 50 minutes northeast of Melbourne CBD, and they're producing some really noteworthy whiskies that have reached the industry of late. And I'm just super rapt to be talking about these guys because, we've been to the distillery a couple of times, and we know Sam and Chantel quite well. They're an incredible family, and they do some remarkable spirit production. So I'm really keen to kind of get into this and start talking about some of these whiskies.
Yeah. I mean, so this is our lineup for today, which we'll take you through in a moment. We've got two whiskies off camera.
All right, we're putting them in the center, are we?
Putting them in the center.
So
we're not opening today.
Yeah. So we don't actually have any opened core range editions besides the cask strength. So what we're doing today, we're going to talk a little bit about these guys because we're very passionate and excited about them. So this is the 𝙬𝙧 stand. Now these are Josh McMullen's. 𝙬𝙧. So that's the name of the road that the distillery is on, right?
That's it. So this is actually their first and second release here, 1 and 2. There is a little story behind these two. From what I recall, basically, the first release was meant to be their second release. They had 2 barrels or 2 kind of bottlings ready to go. One they thought was really good and they were going to bottle. The other one they thought was no good and they were going to dump. So this one, which is their second release, was on its way out. This, which was intended to be their second release, was bottled as their first release. And someone in the industry got a taste of the one that they were about to dump and said, don't you dare dump it, bottle it. So you've got the OG one, which is the O'Grady's one, and then the O'Grady's 2 FS, which is the false start, meaning it was meant to be the first release.
They were going to literally bin it before they had someone intervene, thank God.
I love the Kinglake bottles, and they have just gone from strength to strength in terms of the quality of their whiskey and the story behind it. So my motto generally is that I will never not open a bottle. There are a small handful that I make an exception
Very
for,
small.
and these two are on that list because I'm assuming when Sam and Chantel make it huge, these will be worth $500,000 each, and I'll retire a happy man.
Thank you. That would be lovely. Thanks, Sam and Chantel.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if we can get him drunk enough through the rest of the lineup to maybe crack one of these bad boys open. I don't know if that's going to happen today, but we can dream, can't we?
No.
Just quickly, I know, so a big part of my channel is talking about the design and aesthetic choices of brands and how they position themselves in the market. And I don't want to detour too much into that lane, but I do just want to quickly talk about the branding of Kinglake because it's pretty noteworthy. They utilize a very simplified bottle. They source all of their glass from France, and Chantel has actually employed her cousin, who's an incredible designer from
Cousin or nephew?
Cousin.
Cousin.
It is cousin.
Cool.
Yeah. And he's actually working for an agency over in the UK at the moment. But early days when they first began in 2018, Chantel contracted him or brought him into the fold to help design their brand. So a big part of the story and the ethos of Kinglake Distillery is they're Australian, they're homemade. It's all about them and their family orientation. And they really wanted to kind of capture that in the essence of their design aesthetic. And for that, the logo, which I'll put up on screen, is meant to represent and inspire. It is heavily inspired by corrugated iron and hand cut pieces of tin and stuff like that.
And wattle, I think, as well. Or is that
The
my
bottle?
interpretation
I
of it?
believe the bottle was actually just whatever they could source from.
No, the logo being wattle. The little...
Oh, yeah. I mean, also, that's something that I've mentioned in the past because I
there you go.
emotionally
Yeah,
I
yeah,
attribute it
yeah.
to the shape of wattle. I don't know if that's actually true.
That's
just-
where my brain goes to now as well when I
100%.
see it.
When you see
Yeah,
it, it's all
yeah.
kind of like corrugated and kind of cut and florally. And
It's very Aussie, down to earth.
it is. And so
strong.
whether or not you see metal or wattle or whatever it is, there is definitely, you see it and you do feel quite Australian. Anyway, so we'll move on from the design for a moment. And yeah, thank you. We got to actually pour ourselves the first dram of the
Like,
night.
how long is he going to talk about design? I want to have a drink.
Me thirsty. Beautiful.
Now, last week I did larger pours.
We're going to be a little bit more modest with our pouring.
Outside of their core range, Kinglake tend to bottle at a higher percentage.
Yes.
The lowest percentage we have in front of us today is a 61%.
61% ABV.
So
pretty substantial. I mean, you know
Shout
what?
out to Kinglake.
You've got to respect that though, because there's a bit of integrity behind a decision to only bottle a decent
And
ABV.
they bottle. Rian's going to talk design. I'm going to talk industry. They bottle at 61% in an Australian whiskey industry. Not always at 61%, but they often bottle higher proof in a whiskey industry that's so heavily punished for producing high strength whiskey, because our taxation rates in Australia are the highest in the world. Fact check me, Rian, on the bottom of the screen if I'm wrong, but they're the highest in the world. They're paying significant amounts of money just on alcohol tax for each of these bottles. It's before you get to GST and their costs of production and all of that other stuff. So it's a real, to me, it's a real sign that they are dedicated to producing quality whiskey, not to producing something cheap and easy.
Yeah, it's not all about like creating something mass market and getting stuff out there. It's about creating something that they're genuinely proud of and genuinely love. And I think you'll soon see that in the actual bottles. So what we're drinking first is the O'Grady Stand cask strength. So bottled at 61% ABV, ex-bourbon casks. It's pretty beautiful. You've beat me to the punch. We're going to even cheers.
Oh, cheers.
So lunch of our guys if you're drinking at home with us. Whoa.
Oh man, we are going to persevere through all of these at 60+%.
Persevere is the right choice of words. I'm going to be skipping through this delightful setup.
So they use Rain's actually got a notebook, which he might pull onto screen with a logo.
Yeah, all right.
But in their mash bill, the reason I mentioned that, the first point I wanted to point out, they use four different grains in their mash bill. When I say mash bill, if you're making a whiskey, the very first step is you take grain, malted barley typically, and you stew it and you ferment it, and then you... Yeah. So when I say mash bill, it's
their core recipe, really.
What kinds of barley are they using? And that's important because different kinds of barley will have different kinds of flavour that they put into the whiskey. And so you'll typically make up a mash bill of a range of different grains that you want to kind of make up the flavour of your flavour profile of your whiskey. In theirs, 25% of it, so 1/4 of their mash bill is this peated, Simpson's heavily peated malt from Scotland, and you just pick up straight away. If you don't like smoky whiskey, it's not going to put you off. It's not taking
the front seat on this journey.
It's just like this, like kind of
accent note. It's kind of just like a little background thing.
Yeah,
that helps
you're walking
like
past a shisha bar, and it's like a little cozy.
A little whiff of it kind of pops into your nose.
And the whiff was obvious, but really lovely in that first sip.
Well, so when I'm smelling this, the first thing I get is the beautiful charred bourbon barrel notes. So I get a lot of the caramels, the warm toffee sugar notes, and stuff like that. But then you do get like a slight kind of petroleum note in there. But it's not like an
petroleum.
Yeah, it's not harsh. It's not brutal. It's not unfriendly. But there's definitely like a little bit of that kind of like smokiness coming in.
Petroleum's not a note I've heard before.
Really? Well, there you go. First time for everything.
That's a new one.
We went to Belgrove recently, and we won't tangent too far down that road, but Josh bought a bottle of, I would say, the most heavily peated whiskey in the world. Even against the Octomore range from Bruichladdich, it's
absurd.
Almost undrinkable.
It's absurd.
It's pretty crazy. But there's nothing like that in here. But
This is similar to what we're doing at Macmillan Distillery with our mash bill is having a peated grain as part of our mash bill. I've given that to multiple people who don't like smoky whiskies, and all of them have really enjoyed it. To me, if you went 100% peated in your mash bill, it's going to be a smoky whiskey. But the way that Kinglake does it, the way that I quite like to do it as well, is if you kind of integrate it as part of it, it just gives the whiskey a bit more of like a body and a depth to it that the other caramel and lighter vanilla notes can kind of dance on. That sounds very, pretentious.
No, but it's
you get what I mean?
No, the smoke adds to the character and the depth of the whiskey, giving it a little bit more complexity. So you're getting a lot of the bourbon notes at the beginning, but there's this lovely airy smokiness that just kind of protrudes and carries on through the body of the whiskey.
Yeah.
And I really do feel it on the finish there. This is one of those whiskeys that just seems to linger. Coats the mouth, beautiful.
Yeah, it's a lovely whiskey. I almost don't want to have it down at 45%. Even I think it would be just as good, but there is so much going on in that at 61%.
Do you get a little bit of like a burnt coffee note in there?
I was thinking burnt. Good segue, but do you talk about with a bourbon barrel, they tend to be charred. So you get some of that kind of burnt charcoal. It's different to smoke taste. I think there is like a burnt kind of...
I don't know if it's so much the barrel influence that's influencing that coffee note, but I think there might even be something to do with the mash bill. I'm not even sure. Like there's definitely like this heavily...
Yeah, it might be mash bill.
Yeah, heavily malted sort of coffee, burnt, sugar, something or other. It's really fun, actually.
It reminds me a bit of... I always get these two mixed up. There's Westland and Westwood whiskey. I think it's Westwood.
Westwood, I think you think.
And they do an American single malt, which is cool because typically in America you get bourbons, but the single malt category actually was, congratulations America. Side note, was just officially recognized as a whiskey category in America. That's super exciting.
What was America was recognized?
Single malt, American single malt.
That's
as a category distinct to
bourbon and Tennessee.
Super exciting because tangent. Bourbon's got some restrictions on it in terms of what you can and can't do. So, where was I going with all of that?
The mash bill?
The mash bill, Westland have the same kind of taste in their mash bill, that kind of toasted coffee note. It must be a grain thing. It might be a yeast thing, but I think it's a grain thing.
Yeah, I really want to talk about... I don't know if you had anything planned for the segment today, but... The fermentation is a really important part of the Kinglake's profile. So they've got an incredible operation. So maybe this is a good point for us to talk about our experience down at Kinglake Distillery at the distillery itself. So imagine this.
Drink while you do it, because I'm ready.
Sorry.
So while we were at Kinglake...
not even while we're at Kinglake, but Kinglake Distillery. Let me paint a picture for you guys sitting at home. It's in the middle of the Australian bush.
Yeah.
When you're on the way there, you don't even recognize that you're on your way to a distillery. It's literally so isolated in the middle of Kinglake National Park. And you have to go down this like dirt road to even get to the distillery. You get pulled down this O'Grady's Lane, which is the road that leads to the actual distillery, which is in this lovely wide open property surrounded by mountain ash and eucalyptus gums all over the place. It's a really like peculiar spot to have a distillery operation running. But when you pull into the distillery, Chantel walks out of this large open shed and greets you, and it's such a lovely, inviting atmosphere. That as you get in, she was walking us around the distillery operation, and she was explaining to us that all of their fermentation tanks are left like wide open.
So cool.
I know. I love that.
So cool.
A big part of their profile and their characteristics are heavily influenced by nature and the surrounding environment, and that plays such a huge role in the whiskey that we're actually experiencing.
Well, even I get notes throughout the Kinglake range. There's a note to me, a background note of eucalyptus. It might be a psychosomatic thing because I see Kinglake and I think Australian bush, and Australian bush makes me think eucalyptus, and that I find that tasting note.
Could be.
But they do open air ferment in a big bushy area full of eucalyptus trees, and
their cask library or warehouse is open
in a shed.
Just let to like all the natural air and pollens and particles just influence the whiskey and get into the cask. So you can't say that doesn't have an influence on the whiskey. You're
Yeah. It's exciting. Let's crack this and keep. Are you ready to crack?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go into bottle number 2. Fantastic. Oh my goodness, what a cork pop.
From the top.
So this is the...
That's my one. Pass me your glass.
See Ya Later Alligator. So this is essentially utilizing ex-bourbon casks, which is very similar, if not the exact same, to the cask strength that we've just had. But the process is a little bit different. So they've utilized casks that were previously heavily charred to a category 4, you were saying before? So
alligator char, they call it.
Alligator char. So that's where this bottle gets its iconic name.
So they call it a See Ya Later Alligator. On the front of the bottle, there's an SYA. They took the alligator charred barrel, which means it was so heavily toasted that the wood inside had started to crack like coal and it looked like alligator skin. They shaved that off and then they re-toasted the barrel and reduced it from 200 litres down to 100 litres. So a lot of different things happened to the poor barrel. But it made a really cool whiskey. And it's interesting, I think, now for us to go from a bourbon cask into a bourbon cask that was shaved, toasted, reduced, and to see what happens.
Well, so this is fantastic because this is probably a really good talking point to talk about that cask difference. I'm like straight off the bat, and I know I said that I'd never say straight off the bat again, but here I am. There is a drastic difference in the nose profile. I'm getting a lot more of the astringency, like a lot more kind of like oak influence coming through. It's amazing how like just shaving off that layer of char has allowed a little bit more of the oakiness to come through on the nose.
But weirdly, so normally if I think of an oak forward whiskey, my brain will go to oak, pepper, caramel, vanilla kind of notes. Caramel, vanilla being more of a bourbon cask. Yeah. But pepper tends to come forward, or spices. To me, this hasn't got those as much. It's like almost like a balsa wood, like a really gentle wood kind of note.
Even like a wood that's been treated with some kind of like stain or something like that, or a varnish even. I'm getting a little bit more of those kind of like varnish notes coming through. And strangely, like there's no sherry influence on this, but I get a little bit more of a fruity note in there.
I'd love to run this over a tawny cask.
Yeah, see how that influences it.
The Werewolf in London, yeah. They did a release called The Werewolf in London that was in a tawny cask, which we can talk about a bit later, but it was really good.
Is that 61% as well?
It sure is, yep.
Fascinating. That has a very different mouthfeel. I'm getting like...
It does.
It's a lot more prickly, a lot more effervescent, I guess is a word that you probably use. Yep. It's kind of like dancing around and just kind of like prickly. Wow.
You know when you drink a warm Coke?
Yes.
And it fizzes more in your mouth, and you have a sip, and it's like... Oh.
Just
there's
like
a bit
an
of that in
explosion.
that See Ya Later Alligator. It's very flavour forward.
It is very flavour forward. I'm feeling like a lot of the maltiness and the sweet notes that you're getting from the previous cask strength are not as prevalent. There's a lot more like raw, woody spice notes.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. There's more of that. I still wouldn't say pepper, but there is more of that oak, spice, prickly kind of feeling in the palate.
Definitely. I'm getting like a little bit of like, we mentioned before eucalyptus, but it's kind of like a eucalyptus oil. Like if you were to put a little bit of like essential oils on your palate, you're getting like the moisture kind of suck out. It's a little bit astringent, a little bit kind of like rough around the edges. I'm getting a lot of that in this.
Eucalyptus.
I'm
getting toast, like not buttered or anything. Just if you took a piece of bread and heavily toasted it. I guess that's toasted grain, but you get that kind of dry, and maybe it is a little bit drier in the mouthfeel because it's had the oak reshaved. You get some more tannins coming out of it than you would have, because the bourbon leaches tannins out of it originally.
You know what? I think that's a very good point. Like it's got a very different mouthfeel, very tannin forward. It's kind of interesting how drastically different these two are.
I'll pop a drop of water in this one.
That's actually a lovely idea, if you wouldn't mind. Sort a brother out. while he's doing the water and we're doing a little bit of
Talk
integration
about
here.
our time there, yeah.
Yeah, like it's such a fun experience. So Chantel was the one who ran us through our first experience at the Kinglake Distillery.
Yep.
And while we were there, just to kind of demonstrate how family orientated this distillery is, their kids were there at the time as well, and they're playing around on their little bikes and
So cool.
running around and
So
screaming. And they were taking us through, and we were seeing they've repurposed and reutilized a lot of different kind of secondhand equipment. So they've got like milk vats that they've utilized for their fermentation tanks and things along those lines. And the tasting room that they've got set up there, it's kind of like a little bit of a cellar door experience. They've got a bar that's been repurposed, and they've got all these beautiful bottles in the background, a lot of their own additions, but also a lot of other distilleries as well. And it was just such a fun experience.
Yeah.
So good. They do all of their milling at their property as well. And I don't know, like it was just kind of cool because it like makes so much mess, and they're just kind of like...
They really open their doors to you. Like when we were there, they were taking us through the process. I want to talk a bit more about that open air fermentation in a second, but they had a big vat out in their barrel warehouse of their grain, and they were like, yeah, chuck a hand in, grab a handful, crunch on it. And I love that because you just, that is their whiskey in half of its purest form, the barrel and the grain in a sense.
Well, can we talk about the other half of their purest form, the water source?
There's so much that goes into the flavour there.
It really does.
The water source, yeah.
So
with the platypus.
Yeah, so they've got
Aussie
a natural spring in their property, 𝙬𝙖𝙪𝙧 Creek, I believe it's called.
I have no idea what it's called.
Something like that. It's like 𝙬𝙧 Creek or 𝙬𝙧 Spring or something along those lines. Maybe we'll put it on the
check your
bottom
notebook.
there. I'll check my notebook. And it floods into this like dam, this lake that they've got on their property. And there's actually a platypus that lives in that lake. And they don't purify the water at all. They don't do any sort of filtration before it enters the actual the water process. I guess like the still or anything like that. And
I'm pretty sure they do filter it.
Maybe they do.
I think you have to.
No, but before it goes into the actual still itself. I'm pretty sure the still does all the filtration for them.
You mean they're distilling the water?
Yeah.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, forgive me if I'm misspeaking. We'll do some fact checking after this. But the beautiful thing about this spring is it actually has a very rich iron and magnesium, iron and calcium profile. So a lot of those really do contribute to the flavor profile of the whiskey and bring out a lot of the different flavors.
Oh, yeah. And if you sit down... You might not pick it up if it's your first or second or third time drinking whiskey, or if it's kind of a hobby, but you can start to pick out what kind of water they've used for a whiskey. I'm not saying you're going to sit down and go, oh, this is a Japanese spring, but you can definitely pick the distilleries, for me, that use a city water source as opposed to a natural spring source. We had one example of a distillery that we visited a while back, and we sat down and we were drinking it, and I kept getting a tasting note in all of them that was this really kind of heavy minerality. And I was saying to the guys, there were a group of us there, I said, oh, there's something about this whiskey that I'm not really enjoying. And
Josh actually said to us, he's like, can you guys just have a sip of the water?
Yeah, pick up the water that they've given you. And you drink the water and you're like, that's where about a third of the taste of the whiskey came from. It was the water.
Especially because the whiskeys we were tasting were all bottled at 40%. Everything in the tasting was 40%. So
60% of what you're drinking is the water source that they've used in that example.
And you can't say that at 60% of the product that you're consuming is water, that water...
If that water has a taste, you're going to taste it.
You're going to taste it.
In the case of Kinglake... They're using this local spring water, and so the whole whiskey is so pure and just like...
in its original state, right? Like
I'd love to actually taste some of the fresh spring water there and see...
Straight out of the pond.
Whether that has notes that it's giving into the whiskey.
Dude, undoubtedly.
Or if it's just a pure background thing and it's like letting the grains and the barrels do their thing.
Well, the barrels and the grains definitely have a very, very dramatic influence on the product that we're consuming. But the water is undoubtedly a huge component.
The water, the yeast. There are so many little tiny triggers that you can pull, levers that you can pull to change the flavour of a whiskey. And Yeah.
100%.
It's exciting.
100%.
Do you want to grab a knife and get this one wedged open?
Let's get into the next whiskey for the
And
show,
we'll keep
guys.
talking about...
Okay, and now it's time for us to open the first bottle, and I think this is probably a really unique experience.
Third
What I mean is it's the first opening and cracking of a brand new bottle, right?
Strap in.
Right?
Because this has a lot of wax.
Okay, so this is a point of controversy on the from bar staff and stuff
See,
like that.
I quite like the wax. We were chatting to the owner of a whiskey bar, and the owner said that he does not like the wax because if the whiskey is popular and people are trying to buy it on a busy night, the process that Rian is currently going through to open the bottle is
it's not ideal.
not quick.
No, and like there's not really a good way to do it. I found the best way to do it is by cutting it open with a knife.
That's way cleaner than I would have done it. That's actually pretty good so far.
Okay, so we've managed to...
of course, the wax comes off.
The wax comes off. We'll clean the table.
It is never as straightforward as it should
I
be.
didn't cut it low enough, and now it's like a bit hard to grip the cork.
And now you're going to be pouring your whiskey over the wax.
So hang on, I'm going to do
an extra flavour note.
Cork pop for you guys. Ooh. I love that.
I give that a 4 corks out of 5.
I'm not sure if you guys can see. I'll see if I can get some of this on the B-roll for you. But like I've managed to cut it a little too high from the lip of the actual bottle itself. So we've got like a little bit of wax that's kind of like hanging over the edge a little bit.
Jamie, can you zoom in on that?
Jamie, we're not Joe Rogan experience.
We need.
Can you?
If you're a Jamie and you want to work on a podcast, please apply below. Pass you one of my glasses.
Yeah.
So this is the
L'American.
It's not L'American.
There's
an apostrophe after the L. So they... I'm going to get this semi-right.
No, you're not.
There was a 200-litre bourbon cask that they split, I believe... Pass me this, because I'm going to read it as I talk. That was split. Whiskey was aged for 18 months in a 200-litre ex-bourbon barrel before 2 years in a French oak barrel that held 𝙬𝙖𝙤𝙪 sherry for 30 years. That's super exciting because 𝙬𝙖𝙤𝙪 more so than Oloroso, I think, is probably my preferred cask of the two for a whiskey. But 𝙬𝙖𝙤𝙪 gives all this kind of like fruity and berry and richness to it.
It's a bit more of like the kind of red fruit and like those kind of notes as opposed to the nutty dried fruits that you get with like
off an Oloroso.
Oloroso.
So this is the sister bottle. As I understand it, that 200-litre ex-bourbon cask was split among 2 casks for finishing. One became this L'American and the other one became the Werewolf in London, which was put into a tawny cask. And that one was also very good. And
it sold out so damn quickly.
Yeah.
And on the auction house in the second-hand market, it has, I mean, how much...
Oh, they go on for silly
amounts of money.
Not silly, but, you know, 600-700 Australian, which is like $5 US. But they're just delicious. And you know, it's taking the really lovely bourbon barrel characteristics that we were talking about in these barrels and then putting them into sherry and wine barrels and getting out some really interesting flavor notes. So tell me what you're smelling.
Well, what I'm getting on the nose is obviously a lot of those red fruits, but you know what? It's kind of, it almost appears as though they've used port in there as opposed to a sherry, which is, I'm finding like quite fascinating. I don't know if anyone else gets that.
Interesting. I definitely get a sherry.
Because it's jammy. It's very like rich strawberry raspberry jam. And it's so like decadent and succulent. I'm saying all the gross words.
See, I get more like dried berries.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm not getting for port, for me, it leans into that. It's got like a coffee note and like really rich, dense berries. For this one, for me, it's all the berries, but it's almost like they've been, you know, when you get those freeze-dried berries and they're kind of dry and...
I'm getting like preserved, like jellies, jams, those kind of, that side of the spectrum of the fruits.
I can see the note that you're talking about, yeah.
Oh, it's got, you know what? This is the fruitiest Kinglake that I've had so far.
Oh, okay. That coffee note that you... I'm not going to actually tell you what to taste, but I think that coffee note that you picked up here is coming through here too. Which makes me think it's a grain note that you're picking up there. It's something in their new make that I haven't picked up until today.
Oh, that is so good.
That is good.
I get like a bit of like a sherbety sort of texture in there as well. Like it's got this kind of like dusty, almost sour sweetness. It's very powdery. Oh, that's so cool, man.
Oh,
That's a lovely dram. That's a lovely dram. It doesn't have
I
any
want
of
to
the...
nerd out on camera. That is a really lovely dram. Yeah.
Very well integrated. The fruit, like excuse me. Sometimes sherry can take a little bit of a left-hand turn down disgusting, mineralized, woody note lane. And there's a lot of distilleries that use sherry casks in a way that doesn't integrate perfectly with the spirit that they're producing. But I feel like Kinglake, I'm not sure if it's the casks that they're selected or if it's the casks mixed with the mash bill and their processes. But there's something very beautiful about the integration between the sherry and this and this whiskey.
Yeah, it's what I love about this is the kind of flavors that are at the front that you're picking up on are those sherry and those kind of honey and those slightly oaky notes, which is from that bourbon barrel. But the base of that whiskey to me, and I think it's definitely to do with their mash bill, but the base of their whiskey is quite savoury and grainy and not very honey forward. A lot of whiskies you can get, and not they're good or bad, just a different note. A lot of whiskies you can get, the new make tends to be quite honey or sweet forward. Our new make tends to do that as well. This one I find
very
is
savoury,
quite savoury and grainy and coffee-ish.
If you were to go down the sweet spectrum, I would say it's probably more towards like an Anzac biscuit or like something along those lines.
Yeah.
You're getting a little bit of the maltiness, and it's kind of coming through as like brown sugar as opposed to like a preserved sugary sweetness. Or
I'd almost
honey.
lean towards like an those oat and nut bars.
Yeah.
Without all the honey in them, just like those really. Yeah.
Almost maple syrupy.
Because I think if you, not that this is something you could do, but if you were to take the same maturation time, the same barrels, everything that this went to, and did a different distillery's new make, that would be quite a sweet kind of Scotch Highland, lovely heather flowery kind of malt. But the fact that it's a Kinglake whiskey and that they're using this slightly more savoury and kind of grainy and coffee-ish new make, and this is an assumption that I'm making off kind of, I've had new Kinglake plenty of times, but I'm just picking up on that note today. It's really interesting because it's balanced. The sweetness isn't running away. It's really well integrated.
No, 100%. And we're massive fans of whiskies that linger on the palate, ones that you can really sit there and digest. And every one of the whiskies we've had so far has been very long, very enduring, and has a lot of complexity. Like, it is a robust flavor profile, but it's got a lot of intricate depth to it as well. Something that you can really kind of dive into and explore. And I think they've really mastered that. And the integration, again, I'll say it again, is so well done. It's very well balanced.
Yeah. I think I've said this before, maybe on the previous podcast. I don't want to sound like I'm bringing up the same flavor note, but it definitely gives me the feeling of like a potpourri bowl where you've got the dried flowers and leaves and kind of if you're making a potpourri, you tend to put different kind of essential oils and things in there to kind of give it this. It's got this very dry, floral, oily.
I get the oiliness,
taste.
yeah. I'm actually just in my head, I'm thinking right now about the influence of all of the environmental factors that go into making Kinglake Distillery whiskey. Now, obviously, you've got the open air vat fermentation. You've got the casks, which are exposed to the environment. You've got the natural spring water.
Exposed to the environment as well. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're right.
But in it, Kinglake, my 9 to 5 outside of starting a distillery is in emergency management. And Kinglake is a really volatile area in terms of the temperature and the fluctuations and the especially the fire danger.
They have a lot of fires.
Storm danger that you get out there too, which makes the fire danger ratings higher later in the year. But you have these fires and this really volatile atmospheric condition out in Kinglake. And I think that probably impacts the barrels too, because they're in this shed. It's not temperature controlled. It's a steel shed, and these
it's got to have a massive impact on how the wood is contracting and expanding.
Oh yeah, they're like an accordion day in day out. I think in and out of that wood, especially through the summer periods. And then in winter, Kinglake is freezing cold.
It is. And they have like an extended period of like darkness there. Like their nights and their winters go on a lot longer than what we get in the CBD area. So yeah, definitely a lot more of that environmental impact.
Really cool impact. I'm excited that we opened this tonight because this is
unique, actually.
I must have had it before, but this is really good.
I don't know if I have tried this before, but I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, we shouldn't sip at the same time. We're boring people.
That is entirely my fault. Well, you know what? I think it's about time we step it up a notch. What do you think? Start moving to the second half of the palate?
Ooh, okay, yeah. We are... Yeah.
Yep,
All
let's
right.
do it.
This is open, so you grab this.
Sounds good. Alrighty. Maybe let's let this one run.
That's good.
I'm liking that.
Buy that. I don't think you can anymore, but buy it if you can. It's really good.
Right.
That's another thing Kinglake does is they have their core range, and they go so hard on these like special releases, like this Cool Rummings. Nice play on the name. This is one of.
Oh, bottle's open.
It doesn't say. Bottle 40 of 167. 167 bottles. That's it. It's kind of cool that they only do these limited runs of some of these releases. This one.
But I think
my point for myself.
Yeah, 100%. I think that also just talks to the scale of the operation that Kinglake is kind of running in. Like they've got a decent size still, but
This is cork. Count the cork.
they are a family-run business. They do everything themselves from end to end, and like all of their expressions, even their call lines, they're all kind of small batch, small casks, and it's a small operation. But the quality of the spirit they're producing is so much bigger than the footprint of their operation. What do we got?
They've
here?
started appearing in some of the... What are those stores called in an airport? Duty frees.
Duty frees.
Kinglake's starting to get around. And
Are they?
Yeah,
They're duty free now?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Fact check me, but I'm pretty sure they're in duty free now.
I love how you say fact check to the camera, but I'm the one that has to go back later and do all the research to fact check this guy.
See below for the fact check.
The audacity.
I felt sorry for him in the last episode. I kept saying Rian's going to put something down here.
And then I had to go, of course, and search and research.
But they're in duty free, probably. Check below. And they got their first shout out in Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible. Love or hate the guy, whatever. He's got a good nose for whiskey.
He does.
Kinglake were in there. And I think they scored high 80s on 90s, if I'm recalling correctly. It wasn't a bad score. And which is, it's exciting. This,
up and coming distillery is finally putting itself on the map and really becoming a brand that people can look for on the industry.
There's a lot of Australian whiskey producers, and all of them have their strengths. But if you're thinking like, I just want to get into the heart of just an outback, honest to goodness family Aussie distillery, in 2 years' time you can buy our stuff right now. Kinglake Distillery is so good.
100%.
So good.
There's clearly a reason that we fell in love with this distillery. Like,
yeah.
Not only is it like, it's so nice to go to a distillery where you're welcomed by the family that are running the whole operation, from sales to marketing to production, all the way through to every end-to-end component of the business. But the spirit that they're producing is so goddamn good. It is good. And it's unique as well. It has such a bespoke kind of flavor profile that I haven't had a lot of these flavors. They're pretty unique to Kinglake.
That savoury coffee notes here again.
Oh, 100%. It's got to be a part of the mash bill.
That's the new make. Yeah, that's the mash bill.
For sure. Now, has this taken a bit of a turn in the direction of vegetal? Like, I'm getting very kind of herbal, a little bit metallic, very mineral sort of notes on the nose. I haven't put it to the palate just yet, but I'm getting some funky notes on the nose.
Yeah, the rum adds a lot of fun, I think, to that new make, to the Kinglake new make. Was this originally in a bourbon barrel? I bet you it probably was. Cask of strength whiskey was fully matured in an ex-bourbon barrel that first held Beanley rum. So it was a rum barrel that was used for a bourbon that was... Anyway,
I'm not sure. But what was the name of the distillery? Bingley?
Bingley.
Queensland. So they're
Another Aussie, yeah.
Queenslander, oldest distillery in Australia, apparently. And we don't need to do our research. We looked it up earlier. Oldest distillery in Australia, registered. And not only that, they do a molasses-based rum. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of a little bit surprised by that. Like on the nose, I get so much more of like a herbal sort of like agricole-based rum kind of nose. But on the palate, there is so much
I see what you mean.
syrupy maltiness.
Yeah. On the palate,
It changes from nose to palate.
I get, and I really like this play here. My personal favorite whiskey ever. I find that it runs this funny line between being a savory kind of nutty and balsamic vinegar flavor, and right next to that note, it's sticky date pudding. That is what the whiskey is. This one for me, it's like the Kinglake new make is taking it in this really grainy, savory, kind of instant coffee direction.
Right.
And then the rum adds this layer of like coconut, I want to say pineapple, it might be mango, some kind of fruitiness to it.
You know what? I completely get that. I get the desecrated coconut.
Yeah, it's like a dried coconut.
It's dry and it's kind of like a little bit dusty. But then there is that lovely blanket of sweetness that just kind of like carries through the entire duration of the palate.
Yeah.
Really sweet, but... Oh, hello.
Oh, we have a special guest.
She's not on the screen just yet. Come over here and say hello to the family. There you go. This is Yuki, everybody.
She has not been to Kinglake Distillery.
No, but we will definitely endeavour to take her in the future.
We will not take the cat.
No. Hey, come on. Time to leave. Come on.
Yeah, she's only blocking you.
Yeah,
the viewership might go up at this point of the episode.
That's so rude.
Because of the cat, not because you're...
Blocked out of the screen.
This is a good... I don't mean to say that generically. This is another really good whiskey. These two stick out to me more so than the first two.
Agreed.
Good. Really good.
Yeah. Like it starts becoming like, this is a lovely core expression, something that you can really get a good feel and grasp of the distillery. But seeing some of their experimental limited release casks, you're really getting a sense of like their creativity of the distillers. Like Sam and Chantel have done an excellent job of like choosing their casks quite wisely. And it's actually made me intrigued to get a hold of some Bingley, just to try out
some
the
Bingley
rum.
rum. Yeah.
Hey Yuki, you're blocking the. You're gonna sit there, aren't you?
2 men and a cat. I'd have to ask Sam. I'm wondering if you know this. You can answer this for me, but
Please.
I reckon they're doing a shorter fermentation as well with their wild yeast. Because often, the longer you let a fermentation run, the less your grain notes come out, and the more you get these kind of fruity, banana-y, plummy kind of notes come out.
Are you talking about Kinglake's malting process, or are you talking a fermentation process?
Fermentation.
But are you talking about the rum distillery or Kinglake?
Kinglake.
Interesting. So
I mean, I'm noticing here more than in the others for me, more of that grainy note. I'd expect probably it's the same fermentation period for each of the whiskies that we've had so far. It's kind of how you would tend to do it. Maybe it's not. But I'm getting more grain forward in this one, and it's just made me think, I reckon it's a shorter fermentation. But I love that it's grain forward. It's so...
You know what? It gives it like a little bit of like... I don't know, there's a novelty note that's coming to the forefront of the palate. It takes a very different direction to anything we've tried so far. Should we try with a little bit of water?
I just thought that too. I reckon a little water.
I'm going to do a couple of drops and just see what happens.
I opened this one so rarely because I remember the first time I had it. It's 167 bottles, so I'm not going to get another. The first time I had it, I thought, yeah, this is shot up immediately to one of my favourite whiskies. So I try not to drink it often, but I got to have another one here just to...
Well, this is the time to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like on a dram half full, guys. Like this is the time to have some real good quality whiskeys. All right. All right. You had to do that, didn't you? All right, we're up to our next whiskey. What are we drinking next, Mr. Josh McMullen?
I want to go on a tangent about coopering for this one, but this is a really cool bottle. It's... So their batch that they've called it ITB2. So this is in the blood, the second release. In the blood means that they have done it in a red gum cask. for you non-Australian fans, I know we've got a big international following at the moment.
Huge international following.
They've used an Australian red gum wood to make this cask.
Can we just say it is a very bloody difficult wood to work with?
Yes.
It's not like working with oak, which is almost like it's naturally made to be put into barrels or used in barrels.
Yeah.
Red gum has...
This was... So it was 2 years in an ex-bourbon cask, so it got its kind of Kinglake bourbon, flavour from that ex-bourbon cask. Finished in a red gum barrel, which was previously filled with dark stout beer for 12 months.
That's very peculiar.
That is really cool.
This is whack. So I'm not even sure if we're going to be tasting red gum or if we're going to be tasting the actual stout. And then also there's so much of a bourbon base to it.
And this is another one of those, I think this is actually even less. This was 76 bottles that they did for this second release. The first one, I don't know, it was slightly more or less, but...
Well, I remember Chantel saying that they had huge issues with leakage and, like a problem with like the actual
because
storing
you're working
the
with
barrels.
red gum.
Yeah. It's very porous, very dry, and it doesn't like the staves of the barrel don't actually like meld well together. And so they had loads of issues with it. But they had these... Do you want to do like a cork pop for you? There you go.
Pork cock?
A pork cock. That's the second time I've done that on this show.
Pig
no,
dick.
I mean... Yeah, it's such a unique barrel to work with, and you're probably not going to find it anywhere outside of Australia. But even within the Australian bounds, it's a very unique barrel to work with, a very unique timber to work with.
One of the benefits of oak is that it seals really well. So using it as a container for storing whiskey, the whiskey doesn't leak. The red gum barrels, I've heard,
Dry and
I think
porous.
it was Sam say that they originally, when you fill them, they just leak like a sieve. So you're losing spirit and they're a pain to work with. You've got to find a cooper to make them because wineries aren't, as far as I know, no one's using red gum casks. So they would have gotten this red gum cask. I'm fairly confident they would have said someone put a stout in it, leave it for that period of time, and then put their whiskey into it afterwards.
That's something we probably could have done a little bit more research on because I'm not sure where who was putting stout in it.
And can you still buy the stout? Because
that's a bloody good question. I mean, is that released on the market? Like, surely
it probably was,
unless they used the stout to season the cask before putting the.
That's also possible because it might have been so volatile the fresh red gum flavor.
They needed to actually almost prepare the barrel for
kill it with a stout. And,
it's a pretty robust beer to put in a cask, so it kind of makes sense. Ooh.
Yeah, and this is.
Do you get the Tambark?
Exciting.
So for last episode, we talked a lot about Tambark as such an Australian note. Imagine warm, dried, hot timber, and that I guess so much of that in this whiskey.
Oh yeah, for you other Australians watching this to me is just like that 40-degree day when you shouldn't really be at school. And you're sitting down in the playground on the hot Tambark and you're bloody thirsty and it's just all you smell is like eucalyptus and dry tan bark.
Not that that's a bad thing, by the way.
It's great to experience it now as a drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a kid, it's probably not as fun, right? I actually think the nose is actually not too dissimilar to the previous one that we just had. What was it? You've just taken it away. What was that bad boy?
Oh, did I put it off screen?
Must have taken
My
it away.
apologies.
All right.
No, it was this way.
That's it. So yeah, not too dissimilar to the rum cask that we've just drunk. I get a little bit more of the herbal notes, a little bit more of the floral, not floral per se, but a little bit more of the metallic, mineral, and woody kind of aromatic notes on the nose. But let's see how it compares on the palate. I'm
finding on the nose where previously you could pick the Kinglake flavour. It's like that has been. Maybe previously 40 to 60% of the nose was that Kinglake new make. For this one, for me, it's 15-20%. It's so subdued by just the intensity of the red gum.
Whoa.
Yeah, right?
Whoa. Mate, that palate is interesting. It has this sort of rounded, sweet, woody note at the forefront. But it quickly drops off, and I get this prickling astringency that kind of hits
very prickly. Yeah,
it hits the mid palate. But then it goes into this lovely, airy, kind of almost a little smoky, but very sugary kind of waftiness that just lingers throughout the duration. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, when Rian says mid-palate, it's kind of that you've gotten through your initial taste and then what sits in your mouth before you swallow it. Prickly is right. And even after swallowing, it's very hot. It's aggressive. It's not aggressive bad. Either, you know, it's very like... It's like you're meeting an American uni student who has like a million ideas and things that they want to tell you. No, because what I mean is this whiskey has so much flavour.
It's got a lot to tell you.
That it does not take a break between like throwing new flavour notes at you.
Yeah, agreed.
And you're like, oh, what's that? Oh, hang on, a new thing's here. Hang on, a new thing's here. And you just kind of get to the end and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
That was a good
analogy. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. It was a bizarre analogy.
Comment below if it was a good analogy. Sorry, I shouldn't talk while I drink.
No, you know what? You're right. It has a lot of characteristics that are fighting for attention. I don't think it's as well balanced as some of these earlier expressions because there is this constant conflict of who's taking the center stage. But having said that, each of these notes are very unique, and I don't think I've had some of these notes before in a whiskey. There's a rich tenant note that's coming out, which I can only describe as red gum. And as you mentioned earlier, it could just be a psychosomatic association, but it's unique. It's very bizarre.
That one, you know when you breathe it in?
Yeah.
Try very hard not to cough on camera there.
No, I think it's a really, really cool whiskey.
Tannic is a good note, though.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, it's wood forward.
It is like it has a long, lingering taste, but it is so dry.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Like, my palate feels like all of the moisture has been stripped out of it.
Oh, totally.
It is like Desert City up in here.
Desert City.
Oh, fascinating.
Don't tell me off for my decent... talkative American analogy when you say it's Desert City up in here.
It's dry.
I think the water
helps a little bit.
Helps a fair bit. The water probably helps here too because red gum is not a tasting note that you would pick up in a whiskey normally. It helps sometimes if you're exploring a new whiskey to kind of water it down and to make it as calm and kind of contained as you can. Because it gives your mind time to pick up on flavour notes and to draw some connections and to help you understand the whiskey. Because this is a new experience. It's not like I'm going... I've had bourbon casks before. I have an idea of what flavour notes I could pick up in here and I can let the flavour journey, you know, unravel itself to me over time. This is like a whole other direction that it's going in and it's really... Yeah.
Look, it's a very unique whiskey. I think it has a lot of flavor characteristics that I haven't really experienced. The dryness is actually like a very... I actually find it quite enjoyable. Like, I feel like there's a bit of a novelty to drinking something like that, which I'm enjoying, actually.
There's a note... I reckon you can even go harder on the water than that, but there's a note now that I don't have the words for yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. It's like a... I don't know if you could get like a plum flavored fairy floss, like a sweet fruity. I don't know why fairy floss. I'm trying to figure it out why fairy floss is coming to mind, but it's kind of sweet and fruity, but really light. It's not like a syrup where it coats your mouth, but it's got this really playful, gentle. I don't
think it's as like high frequency sweetness as a fairy floss.
No,
I get like a bit of maple through there. But the astringency to the wood and the tannins is so dry and so, well, not chemically, but I almost feel like there's like a resinous quality to it. Like I feel like so much of like the tree resin and sap is coming into the actual spirit itself.
Yeah.
I don't know, because it kind of like leaves a chalky, dry sensation on the palate.
I'd love to, I might even do this with some of our distillery tasting lineups, but throw this in as like a blind whiskey and see what people think it is. Because I would probably guess that it was something like a hot climate bourbon cask, which kind of is what it is, that was then put into some kind of red wine cask. There's some kind of fruitiness to it.
There is a bit of fruitiness to it, but it's also like, I was almost thinking maybe chinkapin or something like that, because it's
Chinkapin?
Yeah, it's like a virgin oak. It brings a bit of like a dry nuttiness to it. Not that I'm getting super nutty, but like almost like walnut skins or something like that. Like, you know how it has that kind of like dry, oily sort of texture to it? I don't know.
Stout casks.
How do you feel like the stout has influenced this, by the way?
Yeah,
like,
I'm just thinking that now. I find stout casks add a
creaminess,
a little bit of a creaminess, less that, more a minerality to it, but not like the rock and stone and sea salt minerality that we got out of the Brook Laddie. It's a bit more of like a... The only tasting note I could really compare it to is after you have distilled a wash, you get this leftover barley kind of muck and grime. It's very Vegemite-y, very thick, very kind of heavy on the palate.
Okay. Salty at all?
A little bit salty, maybe like a salty Vegemite-y, but way watered down, not the sharpness of like a Vegemite that you're having on a bit of toast.
Fascinating. Yeah, I don't know if you know what? Like, Vegemite's an interesting note, and I think there is something in there that is like reminiscent of Vegemite. I don't know if it's portraying itself. I'm not even sure if you guys, from anyone abroad who knows Vegemite, congratulations. But it's a quintessential Australian breakfast spread. It's very salt forward and very yeasty. If you're from Europe or England, you might be familiar with Marmite. It's a very similar kind of product. Yeah. So I'm getting a little bit of that sort of Marmite Vegemite sort of note, but it's not super salty. There's like the flavor in the background of it, but it's not super present.
No, so not super present. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. It's very interesting.
If you're booking a tasting at our distillery in the next little while and you want to try this, put in your booking notes. Can you please bring the red gum? Obviously, there's not a lot to bring for everyone, but I'd love to see some of the tasting notes that you guys pick out of this, because it is...
I'd also love to see if anyone else has this bottle and what they think of it.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the rest of the lineup. I feel like it's a very unique whiskey, and it has a lot of characteristics that I've never found in any other whiskey on the face of the bloody earth.
Do you like it better? I don't think I do, but I like it as... I love it as what it is.
Yeah. Look, I love it for its novelty. You know,
yeah.
I say seasoned. I've been drinking whiskey for maybe 6 or 7 years. But as a relatively new seasoned whiskey drinker, there's a mouthful for you, I think it provides a sense of novelty and a sense of freshness, and, you know, gives you something different to kind of contemplate.
Yeah.
You know, so for what it is, I think it's a really cool whiskey. Would I buy it and have it on my shelf? I don't know. I think, to be honest with you, I'd rather like some of these guys, or even like these two. I feel like they have...
If you were getting into if you've had your Starwards and your Archie Roses and your big producer Australian whiskies, and you wanted to kind of figure out what an Aussie craft whiskey distillery is like, you can do a lot worse than Kinglake. Get something down here,
I think
and enjoy it, and they're really good. I wouldn't... If you were new to the Aussie whiskey scene and you wanted to try an Aussie craft whiskey, and you're thinking, this is red gum, this is traditional Australia, I wouldn't go straight for this, because it's so... It's still all Kinglake, but it's so different that it's probably not showing you what Australian craft whiskey is. I think it's showing you what red gum can do to a whiskey, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Whiskey nerds, really good.
Yeah, exactly.
Whiskey fans, really good.
Yeah. And if you're new to the category and you want to explore Australian whiskey, I think this side of the table is where it's at, because these have a lot of the core DNA of Kinglake Distillery.
Yeah, the cask strength,
really
the
good representation of the brand. And I think as a distillery, they do some incredible stuff. So this is where I would begin. Mid-range, this is for your enthusiasts, people that are like really looking to explore like some fun cask maturations and looking to collect something a little bit more limited edition. And then if you're an absolute nerd and you want to try something you've never tried before, this is where it's at. Do it. There is a consumer for every
book a tasting and ask for it. You can have some. This is come and have some. 100%. They recently did a release which we were hoping to get our hands on, which we did.
Bog Monster.
The Bog Monster. Their names are so cool too.
Lefroy casks.
On the topic of Kinglake doing these really cool releases, Cool Rummings, L'American, Werewolf in London.
They love to experiment, don't they?
Bog Monster, ex-Lafroig casks.
Yep.
If you're an Islay fan, you know what Lafroig is. If you're not an Islay fan, it's a really smoky, delicious...
Band-Aid soaked in saline.
And then eat it. It's awesome. Lafroig whiskey
100%.
is so good.
One of the best.
They do some really cool stuff. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't tried Kinglake and you're Aussie, try it. If you haven't tried Kinglake and you're not Aussie and you can get your hands on it,
definitely worth
try it.
Yeah.
It's probably closer to a little closer to a bourbon in terms of mouthfeel, oakiness.
Sam and Chantel are like, sorry to cut you off. Sam and Chantel are really passionate about bourbon casks.
Really?
That's one of their that's one of the core things that they really wanted to invest in early days. And I think this really does showcase that well.
If you like your Macallans, your Glenmorangies, your kind of sweet Highland whiskies,
soft and delicate.
Maybe not fully up your alley, but if you like, and that's why I say bourbon, because they're very kind of hot climate, heavy flavors,
dry.
Jump into these and have a great time, because it's all of that full on flavor stuff without the heavy sweet cherry,
definitely
kind of citrus.
Yeah, even this one which has
notes that bourbon have. Yeah.
It was actually like a really well integrated sort of like, a little bit of the sweet red fruits, but it wasn't like overly bearing or like badly integrated. It was
that
really nice.
Savory coffee, not savory is the wrong word, but that restrained kind of coffee grainy new make just lends itself to like a really well balanced whiskey.
So you would say that Kinglake Distillery is a recommendation from McMullen?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm completely with you.
Yeah, 100%. There's a handful of distilleries that have kind of inspired the direction that we want to go in, and Kinglake are right up there for just this craft distillery that goes so hard on flavour
and doesn't sacrifice quality for the product.
Doesn't sacrifice quality.
You can see that clear as day. Every single one of their whiskies is so
the spring
integral.
water, the open, like there are so many shortcuts you could take making a whiskey, and Kinglake, they don't seem to me to take the shortcuts that others do, and
in fact, quite on the opposite. Like they actually
the whole distillery is carbon
we haven't
neutral.
Even talked about that. Like they so much of their profit actually goes into maintaining their carbon neutral status. The fact that they have solar power.
It's a proper carbon neutral distillery too. Yeah. It's not
just like a platitude they put on their shelf just to say
it's
our
not
office is carbon neutral.
Our office is carbon neutral. Our distillery isn't.
The distillery.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the operation is.
They
even donated a portion of their property to a charity.
Oh, to Rewild or something like that. I did hear about that. Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Look, these guys walk the walk. They don't just talk it. They are really cool.
And you can see that they really do have their eye on like quality casks, and they really are looking for like something that's going to help enhance the core spirit that they've produced. They've got a really fun and engaging and creative mash bill, incorporating all these different elements that help balance out complexity with challenging notes, with like lovely kind of like foundational notes. And then their cask system is like impeccable. Like they really do have a great core range with some really fun and unique experiments.
Yeah, and they experiment. They really do.
So
their kids are dipping these bottles into the wax to seal them. Like it's cool.
Wow, what a lovely cork. I mean, how beautiful was that?
We definitely didn't use that cork transition to hide the fact that we lost footage and needed to refilm the last 45 seconds of this video.
A week later.
This plant has changed position.
And you might notice the lighting is a little different. We had some technical difficulties, okay? And we lost the last 40 seconds. But
we are professionals.
And that's why we're sitting here drinking this entire lineup again. So back to the beginning. I'm just kidding.
We love Kinglake Distillery.
Honestly, Kinglake do some incredible stuff. Guys, if you ever have the opportunity, you've got to make your way back down here to Melbourne or to Victoria to try out Kinglake Distillery. Sam and Chantel would love to have you, and they make some incredible product that I'm sure you will love.
And they're whiskey nerds. Like, maybe nerds is the wrong word, but they love whiskey. What's exciting for me is you go to their... they have a new tasting room, so if you haven't been, go, and if you have been, go again.
Is that open now?
I don't know if it's open yet. Check the website. But
work in progress.
It looks cool.
Yeah.
But behind their bar, every time I visit it, it's not just Kinglake products. They've got Backwoods, which we should do an episode on at some point. They have a whole bunch of different Aussie distilleries. They have some different Scottish ones. Like, they're just passionate about whiskey, about the product that they're making, which is exciting.
Yeah.
So go and have a dram and chat with them and check out the barrel room. And
Make the effort to get down here because it's so worth the adventure.
It really is
out
worth
to Kinglake.
it. And it's off the beaten track and it's a bit of a hike from Melbourne, but
that makes it
so
fun. It's
worth it.
It's part of the adventure, making your way out there.
Stop by Lilydale on the way, come and visit us, have a couple drams as well. I tell you, the best whiskey in Australia right now is just a little northeast of Melbourne.
But it'll soon be east, west.
No. I mean Kinglake and us. Kinglake and us.
Yeah. All good. Well, guys, that's pretty much a wrap for today. Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through this beautiful lineup of Kinglake Distillery. If you liked the video, please don't forget to like it,
subscribe, algorithm stuff,
all that kind of jazz. Got to do it for the algorithm. But thank you so much for joining us, and may your days be as full as your glass. Cheers, guys.
See you next week.
Catch ya. Outro.